Good afternoon, everyone. The after lunch session is often really hard. I used to live in Hong Kong and people would actively snore after a dumpling festival, essentially, which was lunchtime. So thanks very much for having me. I'd especially like to thank Zach and Kelsim for the opportunity to come and speak with them and look at the way that we add value together to help organisations with their incident response. And what I'm going to be talking about, just briefly, 15 to 20 minutes, I'm going to be talking about a little bit of what we've learned. So I just want to briefly introduce myself. I don't come from an insurance background, though Aon is probably the world's largest insurance broker, amongst other things, and risk management company. I come from 25 years in IT security. So I used to, like many of you, used to run around and connect companies up to the internet for the first time and install their first firewalls. I think I installed one of the first, if not the first, Cisco PIX firewall, which was agonizing. It didn't work. I got it working in the end, but I was on my knees in a cold data center for about 8 hours. So it was a bit of a pain in the neck. So I'm sort of one of the AusCERT community, more so than I'm an insurance broker, and I'm definitely not here to pitch insurance. What I am here to talk about is I'm here to talk about the risk management. I'm here to talk about what we're seeing. We have current incidents underway that are literally crippling to business, and insurance is coming in on that. So I'll talk through all of that. Okay, so just to start off, and this is a point I always make, the only way to reduce the brand and reputational damage of a cyber risk is to handle it well. It's the only way to reduce the damage to brand and reputation. In terms of that, it's all about really being prepared, being ready to handle an incident, and handling it well. And we've seen examples of this. We've seen, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Red Cross Blood Service. They had an incident, they had insurance, they had an incident response plan, everyone's forgotten about it. If I asked for a show of hands, probably not that many of you would put your hand up on that one. But how many of you have heard about the Australian census and what happened there? Now that's how you don't handle an incident. And I think we can see others like Equifax more recently. Basically what happened with Equifax is that within 48 hours of the Equifax announcement, they had something like 64 class actions happening against them. And the fact that that business is going to be allowed to stay in business, I find very confusing to me. So I just want to talk quickly about one of the key motivations that we're seeing. So Aon's customer is the head of risk. And this was a new world for me, coming from IT, where you're lucky if you can get up to the CIO, very lucky if you can get up in front of the board. But the head of operational risk or the head of insurance or whoever is a very key player with the company, and that's because insurance is a massive spend. And I'm not just talking about cyber, I'm talking about property insurance, industrial special risks, general liability, professional indemnity, directors and officers insurance. I could go on and you'd all fall asleep. And I promised Zach I wouldn't let anyone fall asleep. So in that respect, huge spend, board level visibility, as opposed to a component spend of an IT budget, which is where IT security often comes in. Hands up who's a CISO or who wants to be a CISO. I thought everyone would put their hands up to that one. Anyway, so the role of the CISO as it's evolved is the CISO, as it should be, actually has a dotted line, if not a direct line, to the Audit and Risk Committee, potentially to the board of, and that's the board of directors. So what they're saying is well, our risk could be IT. One of our biggest risks is IT. So we need to have a look at mitigation areas around that. So in terms of impacts to directors and officers, we're all familiar with the Yahoo breach, 300 million account details, all of this kind of stuff. And it's an interesting little offshoot that maybe you might not have seen because it's like, yes, yet another class action against Yahoo. Was what they did is they put together, and it's never been successful before, they put together a class action against the officers and directors personally for negligence, because they had the dip in the share price as a result of the loss of value in the sale to Verizon, who I used to work for. So that was successful, and that was settled, that came in at $70 million, US dollars. Now split amongst 12 people, if that's how many people are on the board, that's pretty crippling. You're not sending your grandkids to private school anymore, are you, Mr. Director? So they're starting to get this, and they're starting to get very concerned. So if we want to start talking about mitigation strategies, mitigation technologies, these kind of things, we can have these conversations at board level. They care. They believe that they're not sufficiently knowledgeable in terms of governance on that. Oops. So cyber insurance. very, very, very quickly, this in a nutshell. When I first started, I thought maybe you get some money back. You have a cyber incident, you get some money back, like car insurance. Well, that's not it. So yes, you can do that, but the main thing about it is the incident response or first-party capability of the insurance. So if you've got an insurance policy, and we've seen a couple of these recently, big ones, you've got a fridge magnet with a 1-800 number that you can call, and that 1-800 number will put you straight through to an A team of professionals that will come in and help you. One of them is John Moran, who's sitting on a panel just over from me, who works for Clyde & Co. He's a partner, he's a specialist in cyber risk. He would say, shh, don't tell anyone until we've figured out what's going on here. You know, then we'll make the correct statement. So you've got legal advice. Now, as you know, lawyers cost a lot of money. You get IT forensic. Companies like KPMG Forensic, Symantec, Mandiant, they tend to sit on the insurer panels. So they're going to come in, help you contain and potentially commence the investigation. You've also got the things that people don't really think about, certainly IT people don't think about, notification costs, and PR. Very, very important. What am I talking about here? Reducing the brand and reputational damage from an incident, because if it's handled well, you can get away with it. Back to the Red Cross. And that's pretty much it. You can also have business interruption costs covered. You can also have, or you will typically have, third-party claims. So again, going back to the class action, I'm sorry if I go like a broken record, but if you get sued by 100,000 people, you're going to want some insurance on that one. Because if you've got to pay them each out 10,000, my mental calculator goes E, which it does quite a lot, by the way. Mandatory breach notification, you will have had this shoved down. I haven't been here for many sessions, but you will have had this shoved down your throat. GDPR, this is also driving organisations to become more operationally mature. They don't want to have to mess with this, so they're building bigger, stronger castles. They don't want to get in this kind of trouble and end up with a 4% fine. And just on this, something that I find quite amusing, or just something I've been thinking about. Imagine you're Procter & Gamble or Ford, and you have a big problem with EU citizens' data, and The Hague turns around and says, Ford, you owe us 4% of your global revenue. Do you think Donald Trump's going to let them pay that? Or do you think we might have World War III? Just something I've been thinking about. Okay, large retail example. So everyone talks about Target. I'll talk about Target. We were Target's insurance broker at the time. They had a major incident. This is 2014. Pretty much been the benchmark for how expensive these things can be. What happened with Target? They came in via a third-party service provider. We're all aware of third-party service provider risks and our responsibilities in making sure that third-party service providers do their thing. And what they did, you know, we know it was organised crime back because of the way they acted. So they got in, realised that they got into third-party service provider, realised that they had access to Target's network, performed reconnaissance, found the point of sale system and waited until Black Friday, which is a big retail festival, and then took all the credit card details and sold them out onto the dark market. Now, the costs of Target of that breach are anticipated to be now more than $2 billion to the company. And they're still in business. That says something about how much money Target makes. But they had insurance, they had cyber insurance, they had 125 million in insurance, which doesn't even come close in terms of that. And quantification of insurance is something that we do. And this is an important point to make. A lot of companies out there have bought cyber insurance and they've bought a 5 mil, 10 mil limit. Why? 5 mil seems like a lot of money. 10 mil seems like a lot of money without really quantifying where that comes in and what's covered under other insurance. So one of the things that Aon does, amongst other services that we offer, is we will come in and we'll quantify this risk. And so when I started, I thought this was a dark art. How can someone possibly come up with a cost estimate for a cyber incident? But we do it. We run the quant. We do gap analysis against other things, and we provide a company with a report that says, if we have this worst case scenario, because everything else will come under the worst case scenario. So say your retail, loss of all your customer data, say your mining company, inability to mine coal or whatever, you know, supply chain interruption. We cost that out, we come up with the biggest cost, and then we put up with a report, we put up a report that can go out to the board, and they can sit there and they can look at it and say, we have this major incident, it's going to cost us $30 million. We need $30 million of insurance, or we reckon we can wear it off our balance sheet. And 30% of companies that do this exercise do. So I just wanted to follow up, just finish up by talking about something that's very important. So when the balloon goes up and you have a cyber incident, one of the ways that you can reduce the cost of investigation and thereby make the insurers happy is by having all the information at hand. So when I talk to customers, when I start off, I look at their operational maturity. So how mature are you as an organisation in terms of what are you logging? How can you investigate? Do you look at network behaviours? How are you keeping all of that information? And that is critical to reducing the time and effort required in terms of performing an investigation. So again, back to my initial statement, the only way to reduce the brand and reputational damage from a cyber incident is to handle it well and have the right tools, etc. Thank you. So. Leaving. We'll have questions at the end, but sure.
I just wanted to know whether Target got their claim paid out and whether or not they sufficiently protected their network against a third-party risk.
Yes and no. So the yes is yes, that 125 million was all paid out. But in terms of were they well enough defended against third-party risks, I would say no. And I would say 95% of the companies that I talk to haven't adequately done due diligence on the third parties in terms of, and I would advise everyone to go through those contracts. Don't click yes like you do on your iPhone when you get an update. You know, you're going to need to know limitations of liability and that stuff are really important. So.
Hello everyone, thanks very much, and thanks Fergus. So yes, I'm Zach Siddiqui, and it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to come and talk to you today. So let's ask ourselves the question, what's the first thing that Fergus's forensic incident response team is going to need when they arrive, right? It's the A team, essentially. They're going to need immediate access to everything that goes on in the organization. They'll start collecting all of the information, but by that time the attackers are gone. So realistically, there's not much that they're going to find. Rather, they're going to want to leverage your capabilities to collect all of that information. And if you don't have enough to track and capture the threat, there's going to be absolute chaos. The challenge is that the threat signatures often come after the fact. So how is the forensic response team going to identify a threat if a signature for it has not yet been developed? How do you go back in time and understand the impact if you didn't collect the source of truth in the first place? What about your net flows? Who's talking to which IP addresses? What about your DNS requests that identify or that help you identify command and control services? The current issue is that many organizations are capturing only a fraction of the traffic because there's a limited capability to capture, retain, and search all your network traffic. So this leads to not knowing what's going on in your environment. By capturing all your security logs, you're giving your organization the chance to respond to an incident with facts. You give yourself the chance to piece together enough information to identify threats, individuals in the organization, machines in the network that have been part of the attack vector. If you look at it from a cyber risk insurance point of view, you should have a capability in place for the forensic incident response team to consume when they begin. Yeah, Fergus's A team. There are three important points to take note of here. First, the more mature your SIEM environment, the more effective your insurance solution will be. Second, the more mature your SIEM environment, the more effective your insurance solution will be. And third, the more mature your SIEM environment, the more effective, am I sounding like a broken record? If you've got heuristics and intelligence and anomaly detection, and you're aggregating, you're normalizing, you've got a well-tuned log management or SIEM solution, then you should see the exfiltration of data. As long as you're capturing essential things such as your bytes in, bytes out from all of your network flows, right? You're not going to see a large data exfiltration unless you're capturing packet volumes. This will tell you what information is moving from where to where. Only then can you trace down to a particular time frame when an incident actually happened. And that's when the value of a SIEM with real-time correlation capabilities comes in. In this age of turnkey cloud services, we're seeing things such as command and control servers that use the same DNS, right, but are aliased to ever-rotating IP addresses. It would only ever look malicious if you're able to add up the total packet bytes of all of these servers combined. So there's an opportunity to classify a set of command and control servers, i.e., different IP addresses, as a single command and control service, right? But how do you do that? One effective strategy is to take that single FQDN from your DNS logs and correlate it with network flows and URL logs to identify a range of external IPs that are part of the same command and control service. That way, individual flows that would normally go unnoticed can be aggregated to something that's noticeable, right? And this is before threat intelligence feeds are updated with the latest threats. But this is only possible if your SIEM has a correlation engine that can do it fast enough. If not, you must invest in a correlation engine, which can be expensive if you don't do your homework. So I'm just going to do a quick survey. I promise you it won't hurt. Put your hand up if you are logging your network flows. Oh, that's really good. So keep them up and keep your hand up if you're also logging your DNS requests. Okay. Keep your hand up if you're also logging URLs from your proxy. Okay. So hands up if you're doing all three. Okay. So maybe about 20% of the room. I'll leave you with a few key points about why you need to be logging as much as possible and why logging that trifecta, the three things that I just mentioned, is really important, amongst other things. Log everything because you'll be thankful that you did when you have a critical security incident. Log everything because you need to demonstrate that you're taking appropriate action to the Privacy Commissioner in accordance with the mandatory data breach notification legislation. Log everything so that you've covered yourself and you can demonstrate a chain of events that shows that you could not have reasonably foreseen and protected against certain threats. Log everything because next-gen firewalls, despite what people say, are not the be-all and end-all of security. Log everything because your security operations staff need to be keeping an eye on what's happening in your environment on a day-to-day basis. Log everything because if your company makes large amounts of money, you could be vulnerable to financial flows related to organized crime. Log everything because you could be requested by law enforcement bodies to assist with investigations of violence, murder, and suicide, and traffic of illicit materials such as child pornography. And log everything to assist law enforcement bodies in such a way that you prevent damage to your corporate brand because the information that you are a custodian of makes you a valuable contributor to your company's crisis management plan. And these are not things that I've made up. These are things that have actually happened that we've assisted customers with. Information is the security practitioner's lifeblood. There are only two types of security professionals when it comes to logging. Those who know that they need to log everything, and those who regret it at some point in the future that they didn't. Thank you very much.
Okay, we definitely have time for some questions. So I've got the mic here, so raise your hand high if you have a question because the light's quite bright here. Any questions? Yep, okay, hang on.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Matthew from Monash University. My question is around providing insurance to some of the industries that are known to really struggle with providing adequate cybersecurity. So the health industry is one that comes up a lot where, they haven't really caught up in the cybersecurity space. So how do you manage to provide insurance to them?
It's a $64,000 question. So, so we as a broker, it's our role to pull the insurers into line, to say to the insurers, look, this is a risk. And we want the customer, I will frankly say to some organisations that I don't think that it's time for them to get insurance. I walk into some customers and I do my basket case assessment. That's what I call it. I don't tell the customer that. But the basket case assessment sort of goes along the line. Do you have an incident response plan? Have you tested it? Do you run security awareness training, etc.? If they can't answer any of those questions adequately, I'm like, go off and, I can help you with companies that can help you to do that. Go off and do some testing. And we probably have a very large proportion of the healthcare companies as our customers, all the way from, your high level ones that have multiple different things, pathology and ambulance and hospitals and all that kind of stuff, all the way down to aged care. And you get so a smaller aged care, like a single nursing home, that kind of stuff. How good do you think their controls are? But I guess what we have to do when we're talking to the insurers, if a customer looks like they're not going to be able to fill in the proposal form, I know it's a stupid word, but the insurance industry uses proposal form to mean application form. So I'm applying for insurance. Then we'll talk them through the steps. Then what the insurers might do, and I had this with a hospital, small hospital, what happened there is that one of the insurance companies, they wanted a $10 million limit, and one of the insurance companies said you can only have a $5 million limit because you don't encrypt the records at rest. Another insurer said you can only have a $5 million limit because you don't use two-factor authentication for administrative tasks. So what I'm kind of getting at is there's no firm level. But as you get further down to smaller companies, the insurers start to aggregate the risk. So all they want to know is how many staff you've got, how many records you've got, what's your annual turnover, and they'll box tick and they'll give you a policy. So that's a smaller company. When they get larger, it becomes a lot more complicated. And again, I think that's what my job is to try and help people help the insurers and help the customers work it out.
Do you find it actually motivated them to introduce those controls?
Absolutely. So I was speaking to Mike Burgess, I think he's here at the moment, but when he was back at Telstra, and we talked about the parallel spend of insurance and IT, and at some point it crosses over, it makes sense to keep spending on controls, never stop spending on controls, but at some stage transfer the risk over to insurance so that you've got that. Another motivator that I've seen, and we had this with another healthcare company in Brisbane, Queensland, and which is where we are, and in the end, the chief security officer, they couldn't squeeze more money into their insurance budget to buy cyber insurance, but they wanted the incident response, and their chief security officer turned around and said, have some of my tools budget. So I'll pay for the first year's premium because I want the incident response capabilities right now, because I can't go out and get a retainer with Mandy and with a law firm and with this and that and do incident response testing. So I think the two things motivate each other.
Thanks for the question. Any other questions, please? We've got plenty of time, so hopefully we've got a couple more. All right. I'm going to stand here for another 10 seconds. Okay. Well, look, thanks. Let's thank Zach and Fergus, please, for the good presentation.